passed to prey upon the wealth of the American people. U.S. Congress has tried to stop them twice in the last decade by defunding them. We saw through this that the executive agencies are too powerful for even the United States Congress to limit. So how did people come to know about the Bundy family, my family? Well, in April 2014, the BLM joined forces with 4 other federal agencies to enforce their unlawful trespass and destroy our ranch. They set up a massive military-like compound on the range. With 200 hired guns, mercenaries, they surrounded our ranch and put it under siege. They began to brutally round up our cattle with helicopters, running them to death, shooting them from the air, and leaving the newborn calves out on the range to thirst to death or to be eaten by coyotes. The dead cattle were dumped in mass graves dug by federal backhoes. They also began destroying the water infrastructure that had been established over 100 years ago. Our family was threatened by BLM personnel that said, if we resisted in any way, this would be another Waco or Ruby Ridge. Knowing beforehand the abuses that they were about to cause would bring public outcry, the BLM built 2 First Amendment areas in non-conspicuous places and threatened the public with arrest and federal charges if anyone protests outside these areas. Our family, friends, and other local people began to protest first. They insisted not to have their First Amendment rights corralled and refused to protest in these remote, designated areas. With hired snipers on the hills, federal agents began to gang beat protesters for filming their abusive actions. For several days, they body slammed us to the asphalt, sicked dogs on us, tased us, and threatened to open fire on us for protesting on what they said was their property, even standing next to State Highway 170 with guns to our heads and our children's heads. Federal agents said that the road belonged to the state, but the earth under it belonged to them. Much of this abuse was caught on video and was posted on the internet. Within hours, millions had viewed the gross actions of these federal agencies. People from all over the United States began flowing to the ranch. That Saturday, thousands had assembled and demanded the Clark County Sheriff Department and the state governor to do their jobs in protecting the people from out-of-control federal agencies. The Clark County Sheriff's Department finally stepped in and ended the abuse. All federal agents left the area within an hour, and the surviving cattle were brought back to the ranch to be doctored or turned out on the range, and then we went back to ranching. This infuriated the bureaucrats. People such as Harry Reid, who has personally made millions off of land deals with the Bureau of Land Management, publicly came out against our family and the people that stood up to them, calling us domestic terrorists, threatening that this was not over. Many of us wore name tags that read, "Hi, my name is so-and-so, and I'm a domestic terrorist." Great-grandmothers, little children, and everyone in between wore them proudly. Since then, federal agencies have mounted a continual media campaign to demonize my family and those that stood against their horrific actions. In defense, we've had to respond by publishing the truth. My mother, sisters, and many of our friends and family have done the best we could to stop them from controlling the narrative. We knew that if they could change the public sentiment, they would once again justify forceful action against us. In an effort to make sure that this did not happen to any more families in Nevada, in early 2015, my family, along with several state representatives, entered a bill into the Nevada legislature. This bill would end the federal land grabs in the state and force the federal government to follow the Constitution to control land inside the state. Bill AB 408. It was the most publicly supported bill in the Nevada history. Despite its popularity, bureaucrats united together from within and changed the text of the bill right before it was voted on. The new text gave them more power rather than take it away. It was a full array of politics at its finest. On the last day of the House vote, we had to kill our own bill, hoping that Nevada legislatures would stand up to federal agencies and protect families like ours. We left Carson City with our heads hanging low and went back to ranching, working, and raising children. Before I go on, I need to say that even though our family is suffering great pain and sorrow right now, we do not hate or harbor anger for anyone. We pray daily and diligently for those who have and continue to harm us. We love the Lord Jesus Christ and desire in the end for all of us even those that have spitefully put us in these jails, to find peace and happiness through his forgiveness and example. Through these great tribulations, we have strived to follow the Lord and do only as he has asked. Now let me go on. Now let me go on. Towards the end of 2015, many became aware of another ranching family in Oregon, the Hammonds, where the father, Dwight, 74, and the son, Stephen, 43, had been put in prison for resisting federal agencies of the executive branch in taking their lands. The abuse to this family over 2 decades is terrible. Federal agencies of the executive branch teamed together and have taken their water rights, destroyed much of their ranch, restricted use of private property and access to it. Through the courts, they have taken hundreds of thousands of dollars in fines, forced them to sign that they would only sell their ranch to the BLM, and put them in prison the second time for doing maintenance on their ranch without a permit from the Bureau of Land Management. All of this was done inside the state of Oregon on private property or land that federal agencies do not have constituted authority to administrate. These same tactics are being used to take established property rights all over the United States. The EPA, an agency of the executive branch, is using the same playbook in the eastern states. Before federal agencies diminished ranching and destroyed logging in Harney County, where the Hammonds lived, the county had the highest family incomes in the state of Oregon. Now families in Harney County struggle with the lowest incomes in the state. Over the last 30 years, Harney County has consistently declined in incomes, population, and jobs because of the federal government's overtake of the land and resources. The best hope of employment anyone has now in Harney County is working for a federal agency of the executive branch, the BLM, Forest Service, or Fish and Wildlife. Government employment tallies at 58% of Harney County income. This percent does not include those on government assistance. Together, approximately 70% of Harney County residents depend on the government for their living. The remaining minority, the producers, are choking from forceful regulation and live in fear of retaliation if they speak out. Those that do speak and live in fear of retaliation if they speak out. Those that do speak out.
That was your son Ammon there, right?
Yeah, and I want to make a comment on this. Ammon was in prison when he made this recording. I don't know exactly who put the video together, but the audio, he was talking on a telephone that they had slid under his cell, and he was in confinement. And confinement in the prison, we call it the hole. That's like being in jail in jail. And I'm not so sure Ammon at this point was naked. They had him naked in there and cold, and he did this performance on over the telephone.
Amazing that our government would make someone sit naked in a cell just as extra punishment.
It's not
He hadn't been convicted of it. In fact, he's still not convicted of anything.
No, and it's not only naked, it's cold.
Yeah, I understand. I understand being in a cold jail. I get that.
You understand that? Well,
I do. Talk about that later. But yeah, that was extra torture. And I'd like to get Ammon and Ryan both out here. And you had 2 other sons your wife Carol said were locked up for a while.
Well, it was 4 sons and myself that was locked up for almost 2 years.
700 days for you. And And Ammon was already under arrest when they picked you up at the port.
He had been in there for a couple of weeks before I got there.
And now you flew up to Portland to support them at the Malheur Preserve, and as soon as you got off the airport, off the plane, what happened?
Well, before I even got off the plane, they had me earmarked, I guess. Before I even stepped out of the airplane door, they had got a hold of me, handcuffed me, took me down another stairs off onto the ground, and that's where they arrested me. And so
You hadn't done anything up there.
no, I hadn't done anything. I hadn't even got on the ground. I didn't even got out of the airplane.
And then you had to stand trial in Oregon, right?
No, they moved me to Nevada. They never did indict me in Oregon.
So you weren't with the defendants of Shauna Cox and Ammon and Ryan in the Oregon trial?
No.
They just kept you locked up all that time?
Yeah, I was locked up all that time, but I wasn't involved in that. Yeah.
Wow. At the time you were arrested on that plane, was your son already in custody?
Yes. 2 of them were. Then they picked up the other 2, I don't know, a couple of weeks later or whatever, I'm not sure exactly time. My son, Mel, he was working in southern Arizona, putting building sprinklers and putting the sprinkler systems together. And my son, Dave, was in Utah, Delta, Utah, working on his house. And both times, they brought a big, heavy SWAT team and arrested those guys just like they were the dangerousest people in the world.
Wow. That's me. I think that's me. I'm sorry. That's just amazing how brutal they can be. For your crime, Cliven, was raising cattle, which thousands and thousands of farmers and ranchers across this country raise cattle. And you had established grazing rights. I want to point out, in case you missed it, Mr. Bundy, seated here between me and his attorney in the last trial, Mr. Bundy was never convicted of anything, not even a misdemeanor, in spite of 700 days locked up because the BLM had plans to kill the Bundys. And we didn't find that out, that there was a, quote, kill list until the trial was almost over, right? Or it didn't even get into the court record, Mr. Whipple.
Well, we were about 2.5 months into the trial, but the trial stopped and started and then stopped several times. We had a number of evidentiary hearings prior to the trial. It took a couple, 3 days, 4 days to pick a jury. I think they only got 4 witnesses into the actual trial when they actually called a stop to it.
You only got 4 of your witnesses in.
Their witnesses.
Their witnesses.
But the witnesses were lengthy witnesses. They were on the stand for a couple days apiece on several of them.
Which one was it? Wooten that spilled the beans about Dan Love's kill list?
So Mr. Wooten was an investigator for the Bureau of Land Management after the fact. He was the one that was the lead investigator to come in and make a determination as to what wrongdoing potentially occurred at the standoff. He ended up flipping during the trial and writing essentially the defense a letter outlining all these horrible things that had occurred when he was part of the investigative team for the Bureau of Land Management.
Wow. So he just grew a conscience during the trial, you think? Or?
Well, we never spoke to him. We just got the letter as part of discovery in the middle of the trial. Lo and behold, we're sitting there one morning and we get this letter with all these horrible things that allegedly were taking place on the other side that we knew nothing about.
When did you tell Cliven about that?
Clever knew within 24 hours as soon as he was in custody, so the next morning we were able to disclose it to him.
Did you say thank you, God?
At that point, to be honest with you, it was already heading south. We already knew that we were going to be in a position to get the case dismissed because at the end of the day, the Wooten letter wasn't even part of the dismissal.
Wow, so that never got on the record yet.
Yeah, that's true. It's still never been on the.
That's still not on the record yet.
We had actually, Cliven and myself had filed a motion to dismiss on that issue alone. But the ruling was actually with regard to the SWAT teams that the government refused to disclose, the cameras that the government's refused to disclose, all the issues that they had misled us about even before we got to the Wooten letter is what the case is dismissed on.
Wow. So this is breaking news that Wooten wrote this letter.
Yeah.
Didn't get in. This isn't why they dismissed it with prejudice. But Cliven, you told me over the phone you would have rather let the jury go ahead and decide.
Well, yeah, I would have liked to seen this case go on and have the jury acquit me, because that would have set a precedent. So right now, what happened is basically they just dismissed it. There were no guilty or innocent declared by a jury. If we'd had a jury actually continued here and found us all innocent, they would set precedents. And what really happens now is they, in my way of thinking, they saved the federal people a lot of embarrassment.
Yeah.
And they just basically put me back where I was 25 years ago with a court order against me.
Would you sum it up the same way, Mr. Whipple?
Well, a win's a win, and at the end of the day, we won, and Cliven is free, and that's the most important thing. At the end of the day, he's also taken a real leadership position regarding state rights, and I'm glad that he's here, and I'm glad to be part of it.
Well, I'm glad you took your position. I'm glad I'm still alive to do this television show, Cliven. Though I know there's a few county DAs would wish I wasn't alive anymore, but too bad. Michael was actually really innocent, and you guys should have prosecuted your own prosecutor, Tom Sneddon. Should Prosecutor Steve, what's that last name?
Mr. Myrie?
Myrie, I don't like to say dirty words on television, Mr. Whipple. That's why I didn't say it, but I'll let you say it. Should he be indicted? For the Brady violations?
That's not my position, honestly.
No, but looking as an American citizen that believes in the Constitution, should the prosecutors be indicted for their felony Brady violations?
I'm not going to go there. I don't have all the facts. I just know there were a lot of stuff that went on that should never have gone on, and that's why the judge dismissed it. You know, if they'd fought fair from the beginning, we wouldn't even be here. I think what they owe a huge apology to Cliven Bundy for taking away 2 years, 700 days of his independence. But
what is that worth in a lawsuit? Give me a guesstimate.
Well, that's up to Cliven. Again, I work for Cliven, and that's a decision that he'll make at some point. But, you know, he's now a leader for states' rights, and people look at him for leadership. And I think the issue is much more important than Cliven himself, and that is the fact that the issue of all these lands should belong to the people who utilize it.
Well, I think Cliven has made that case. Unfortunately, the Hammonds, whose name are Stephen and Dwight, right?
Right.
We think they're still sitting in jail years. They're from Oregon, and that's what your two sons went up to bring attention. This is the amazing Bundy family, if you haven't caught on. Cliven's two sons, Amon, who appeared here once by phone, and Ryan, I've never met, went up to Oregon, right, to bring attention that these two guys, the Hammonds, should not be even prosecuted. This is the Uranium One Agenda 21 swindle that goes back to Hillary Clinton and a whole bunch of scumbags that we don't have time to list because we've only got 3 minutes left. Please write Dwayne Elmer a letter. He's sitting in Lompoc prison, less than 25 miles from here, probably less than 20 miles from here. We'll show you his address again. Write him a letter. All he did to get thrown into jail is dig a ditch so Amon and Ryan and the militia in Oregon could drop into a hole and dodge bullets that they were told were